to help businesses and individuals secure their rights. And litigators, they come in after things go bad, which I hope none of you will ever have to come to me or anybody like me. But a good thing about a litigation practice is that we understand conflicts and issues that come up. So you being here tonight and us discussing these type of issues that come up with registration, you have an advantage that a lot of people don't have, that they will come to a law firm after things have gone bad. So again, I just want to say welcome, and I think it's a great idea that you're here. The first thing that I want to talk about is just distinguishing some factors for organizing a business. So when you are beginning to think about what type of business that you want to start, things that you should think about are like the extent of liability that you want to have. Liability means responsibility, legal responsibility that you have as a business owner. In different legal structures or business structures, there's different levels of liability. And we'll talk about that later, but that's something that you should consider is how much liability I want to have. How much participation do you want to have in management? How do you want to think about continuity of your business, the lifespan of your business, the transferability of the ownership, the degree or complexity of the extent or the organization? And something like that would be, starting a charitable organization within your community, having a few people, a few friends, getting together would be much different than the Red Cross. Although they're both registered charities, the degree of complexity that happens with each organization is different. So when you're starting out a business, you want to think about how complex is this organization? And you might not know at the beginning, you might not know, but those are questions that you have to ask. And also the legal restrictions. So there are 4 primary types of business enterprises in Ontario, Canada. And I would say that those are pretty much in common law jurisdictions. Those are the 4 major type of organizations as well. The first would be a sole proprietorship. And in a sole proprietorship, there's no statute, there's no law, there's nothing that really governs how these things form. There's only one owner, and there's only one person that's responsible for making all the decisions, the upside or the downside of the business. And there are advantages of a sole proprietorship and there are disadvantages, one being that you're only one person. But an advantage is that there are no formal steps of commencing or dissolving this organization. There's no governing statute, so you could basically do a lot. You have a lot of flexibility. This has the effect of simplifying and making things cheaper, possibly the process for starting your business. You have to do a name search though. And there are other things that you have to do as a sole proprietor to make sure that you're not operating under somebody else's name. Because with name comes liability. And we'll talk about that later. In a sole proprietorship, there's a great degree of autonomy. There's a lot that you could do on your own. There are decisions that you can do. I don't know if anybody's here has ever been a part of a board. Has anybody here ever been a part of a board? You could raise your hand on the signal or anything that, whether this is a church board or community board or whatever type of board, you would understand that, decisions just can't be made by one person. And there's a process that things have to go through when there's a board. With the sole proprietorship, there's no board. So there's no hierarchy, there's no bureaucracy that you have to go through. It's just simply one person. And as a sole proprietor, you have one single tax instead of a personal tax and a corporate tax. It's just one tax for yourself and the business combined. So some of the disadvantages of a sole proprietorship is that you're fully liable for all the debts and obligations incurred by the business, even after dissolution. So fully liable. When we talk about business and we talk about liability, on the scale of 1 to 10, this would be the highest, fully liable. That means whatever the business does, you're responsible. Any negative thing that happens with the business, you are responsible. For instance, I have a friend that does a juice making business, and I've advised her, maybe you should incorporate, because then you would insulate yourself against personal liability, especially when you're using or you're thinking about like things that people are ingesting or putting on their skins. And then there's a lot of natural care businesses out there within our communities. And she's chosen to go the sole proprietorship way. But I've advised her that, this is where you're going to be fully responsible. So somebody has one of your natural drinks and has allergic reaction, or, says they've got some type of bacteria from this or whatever, in a corporation, there would be, the corporation would be responsible for any type of harm that happened because of this product. In the juice business or personal care business where you're a sole proprietor, you would be responsible. So if it's Latania's juice or whatever I call it, Latania would be responsible. That means that when somebody sues me and gets a judgment against me, they don't only get a judgment against my business, they're able to come after my personal assets, anything I own, my home, like anything that's registered to me, with whatever exemptions are permitted by law. So basically, when we think about liability, when somebody sues you or something goes wrong and you have to pay, who pays? Is it the corporation? Is it the business, or you? And on a sole proprietorship, it means that it's you. You're the one that's going to be responsible. So I guess, again, there's unlimited liability, and no matter how well you separate your personal assets from the business, in a sole proprietorship, it is always unlimited liability will be your liability. And there's no separation of the business from the owner. Additional owners cannot be added to the organizational structure of a sole proprietorship. So if you're operating this business and you decide that you want to partner, you would have to change the corporate structure. You have to go to a lawyer or somebody that has that ability to restructure your organization, whether by way of a partnership or a corporation. When you're trying to raise capital, which is something that happens within small businesses, that you want to move from that step of just like operating a business where you start to generate more income. When you're thinking about raising capital, it becomes more challenging for a sole proprietorship. As lending or investing in a sole proprietorship is essentially lending or investing to the individual. So there are business programs out there and loans out there that, that are intended only for partnerships or corporations, and you might see some type of hiccups or some type of barriers when you want to raise some more money. Selling a sole proprietorship is more challenging as well, as the only thing to sell is the assets of the business, right? A sole proprietorship may face greater tax burdens as well, as there's no legal separation between the proprietor and the business. And finally, you can't be a sole proprietor and an employee. You can just be a sole proprietor. So those are some of the issues to think about in a sole proprietorship. And the next thing I'm going to just briefly talk about is joint ventures and syndicates.
Latania?
Yes.
Hi, and sorry to interrupt you, because you're saying a lot of amazing gems right now, and I want to make sure that we're capturing them, which is why this is being recorded. But someone did have a question. I just didn't want her question before you jumped into something else in case it was related to that. And I think it was Juanita. Are you still there, Juanita?
I am. No, her question was, has anybody ever been on a board? And what she was referencing is the fact that there's not one sole person that will make that decision. It'll go to an executive board to make that decision. And she had asked if anybody, we could raise our hand. So that's what I had done. My apologies.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. I just thought you had a question.
No, but you're right. All these gems are wonderful. And my hand is falling apart already writing down notes.
Awesome. Okay. Thanks, Latania. Thanks, Juanita.
That's good to hear, guys. So the next thing I'm going to talk about, not in depth a lot, but I think it's important because sometimes people want to know the difference between a partnership and other types of organizational structures that are not exactly partnerships. So we have joint ventures or syndicates. And these are contractual relationships between two or more people that want to engage in business together, but they don't fall under the Partnership Act. And the Partnership Act is different because in order to be a partner, you have to do business with a view of making profits together. So any other joint venture that you join into that is not with a view of making a profit or making money is not a partnership. Okay, so, and that's important because there's a Partnership Act and there's legislation in Ontario that governs that act. But this is just a joint partnership. So if Nikisha wanted to do Getty's Concept and she wanted to pull me in into a business idea, but it's not a partnership because, you know, we have different jobs. This is just, she just wants to go on tour and she wants to bring her lawyer friend, she wants to bring her accountant friend and so her social media friend to do certain things. That would be like a joint venture or a syndicate. And with those type of agreements, there are contracts that govern how, you know, this relationship is going to happen. And it will clearly set out who are the parties and that this is not a partnership. And if it's not clear, then you have to go to court to figure out whether it's a partnership or not. And you might think that this is why would you go to court? And it's a big area of law because sometimes people just don't know what they're gonna do. They come, they have ideas, and they sit down. But to have a partnership, you have to have a view of making money together. That's the only thing. Doing business together, two or more people doing business together with the view of making money together, right? So when we talk about joint partnerships, it's more like a strategic alliance, and you have similar or joint ventures, and there could be like commercial contractual relationships designed to combine resources through the supply without exposing partners to mutual liability. So in a joint venture, you are not trying to be responsible for anything that happens, because in effect, you would have two corporations or two business bodies that come together to do the same thing. So they're kind of protected or they're insulated from liability, like Coke and maybe somebody else that would, if they put on an event, that would be a joint venture as their individual businesses, but they're coming together to do this joint venture, to do this business program. So where we have partnerships in Ontario, the Ontario Partnership Act governs that type of business. So that's different from a sole proprietorship because there's no act that governs that. You're free to do as you may, as long as, you know, you stay within the tax bracket implications, you do what you're supposed to do by law in terms of business, register your name properly, make sure that nobody has a name, that same name. When you're starting a partnership, there is an act that tells you what you can do and what you can't do. That's the Ontario Partnerships Act. And a partnership in this act is defined as a relationship subsisting between two or more persons carrying on business in common with the view of profit. They're contracts and they're governed by common law, but they're also governed by like statutory law, like our laws on paper. And sometimes, again, it's not clear if this is actually a partnership when partnerships break down, because sometimes people don't have partnership agreements that you're supposed to have. And when that happens and there's like you go before the courts will look at the activities of the partners, what they have done together in the business to determine whether or not a partnership exists. There are great advantages to a partnership. There's ease of formation and dissolution. So it's easy to form, it's easy to dissolve. There's a lot of flexibility in designing the internal management structure of the business. Even though there's an act, the act allows you to freely design the type of business you want. And also partnerships allow people to each have a percentage of the ownership, but there are disadvantages as well. There's unlimited joint and several liability. So this is the first time you're going to hear me talk about joint and several liability. Joint liability is in the completeness of the business. That is one aspect of liability. Several liability talks about different percentages of liability for the different levels of partnership. So under a partnership, you are jointly liable and you're severally liable. Two ideas of liability. And I see there's a question. I don't know if.
So the question was, are there any, this come from Jennifer, are there any simple partnership agreement you can share?
Okay, so what I could do, like Nikisha had her slides available to you last night. What I could do is I can drop a template. I could share a template with her to share for what a sample partnership agreement would look like, if that's helpful. So under, again, the disadvantages, there's no separate, or there's no legal separation between the partnership and the individual partners. And that's what, so if you own 10% of the business and your partner owns 90% of the business, because you are jointly and severally liable, you own 100% of the liability, even if you only own 10% of the business. So this is where partnerships become very tricky, but this is law, so there's always answers and questions. Even after the partnership dissolves, you are still liable if there's a liability issue that comes up. So what I can think of, like law firms, sometimes like a lawyer dies and things will come up because they didn't do what they're supposed to do. The partners of the firm are still liable unless there's like a limited liability partnership. So somebody still has to be responsible for what was done. Just because you die doesn't mean that the business dies, depending on the structure of the business and the governing documents of that business, right? Sorry. So remember when I said that in a partnership, you can be jointly and severally liable. So what lawyers do when you come to us and say, I want to make a partnership agreement, what we'll do is we'll incorporate the person, like Nikisha, I'll incorporate Nikisha as a body. And that corporation that I formed from Nikisha, that corporation will be a part of the partnership. So Getty's Concept Corporation becomes a partner with whoever else is a partner of that business. Nikisha could be the sole incorporated director, everything of Getty's Concept, but she's not responsible for the partnership because the partnership is formed under Getty's Concept. Do you get that? I know it's a little bit confusing. So I'll just try to say it again. So under a partnership, you're jointly and severally liable. You as an individual are liable, and you're liable because of the business that you formed. If you want to protect yourself from lawsuits and responsibilities, what lawyers or people that know what they're doing will do is they'll encourage you to form a corporation before you form a partnership, so that the corporation becomes the partner, so that you as an individual are not liable for any of the debts, any of the responsibilities of the corporation. It would be only your corporation. And I see a hand from Juanita again, and I'm not sure if that's a question.
No, it is a question. Thank you. So let me restate what you're saying to make sure that I'm not misunderstanding. So in other words, let's say I create Polka Dot Curtains Incorporated is first, and then Polka Dots Curtains Incorporated creates a partnership with Juanita to protect me. Is that correct?
Okay, so the partnership will be 2 or more people. So A and B corporation, right? Or say we'll do a corporation, or we'll say the corporation is B and C, right? The corporation is between B and C. In order to protect B, the lawyer will create a corporation for B. So it could be the professional corporation of B. It's
Okay.
still B, but you incorporate B in order to protect B from the liability of the business, debts, or whatever come from the partnership. So Latania has to be incorporated to protect Latania if Latania is going to be a partner, right? It's still me. I could be the only director, the only person, but it's just a way, it's a mechanism, a technique that we use to protect individuals from individual liability when they form partnerships, when they enter into partnership agreements. And I see another
Okay.
question.
Before we move on, I'm still not understanding. I apologize. So
Okay.
it's the partnership that incorporated B to not make liable to the business.
You confuse me.
Okay, so let me see if I can simplify. So
Yes,
say
please.
Juanita, if you and I were supposed to go in a partnership, so what I could do is incorporate Getty's concept, right? So Getty's concept is incorporated, and then, so I'm protected under Getty's concept. So then we'll go into partnership, you and I, right? So our partnership could be, we're going to sell Butterfly Gallery, right? So that's our partnership, but I'm protected under Getty's concept. So the partnership is separate from my corporation. Is that correct, Latania?
Yeah. So okay, the partnership is not separate from the corporation. The partnership is separate from you, Nikisha.
Yeah. Oh,
The
yes.
corporation
So the
now,
corporation, yes.
it becomes a partner
With you, because
with
I
you.
am protected.
Yes.
So I'm protected because I'm under a corporation, and the corporation stands on its own.
Yes.
So you
Okay.
are partnered with the corporation, not Nikisha Geddes. So if something is happening within our partnership, it won't affect Nikisha Geddes because the corporation stands on its own, and you just partner with the corporation, not Nikisha Geddes.
So essentially, so Nikisha owns a house, she owns a car, she has a couple properties, she has money in the bank, but she wants to do some business. She comes to my office and says, I want to do a partnership with Juanita. I'd say, well, what are your assets? And she'll tell me I have all these things. And I'll say, well, that's not a good idea because you got assets. We want to make you judgment proof. So we have to form a corporation with Nikisha as a sole director so that her personal assets are not open to anybody else that will have an interest in the corporation if there's a debt, if there's a lawsuit, right? So no matter what happens, I can't, or whoever, like somebody slip and fell, there's some issues, I can't go after Nikisha because Nikisha is not a partner in that business. So Getty's concept is a partner in that business. Is that better?
It does.
Okay.
I'll wait for the next question. I have another one after that, but I'll
Okay,
stay
you
silent.
have two questions. One from Jackie. She raised her hand first, and then there's a question from Danielle in the chat as well.
Okay.
Go, Jackie.
Okay. Hi, Latania.
Hi.
Okay, question based on what you just explained with the corporation and partnership. Now, you could have, what I'm getting from it is that you could have a group, say a 5-person who wanted to partnership in a business. And in order to protect their personal assets, they can all incorporate themselves individually and use those corporations to join into that partnership. So should anything happen, then it would not affect their assets personally. Am I getting that right?
That's exactly what I would advise you to do. Yes.
Okay, and on that premise, let's say we've all done the incorporation of each individual, we've joined into this partnership, which in itself, could that partnership be incorporated also?
So the partnership can't be incorporated.
Oh, okay.
because
Okay.
it's a partnership. That's
Yeah.
a form of business in itself, and it falls
Okay.
under the Business Corporate or the Ontario Partnership Act. But it's a business structure, right? Even with all your 5 friends that come together, and even with you guys forming corporations, you guys are still the partners. It's still you, but you're protected under it's called a corporate veil. That's what it's called. And basically the law that says you can't really pierce the corporate veil unless there's a really good reason to do that. So the I'll say North American laws, they encourage people to start businesses, and they want you to generate all this money so that you can pour it back into the economy. So they're not going to allow, or the laws are not set so that, you know, you're going to be losing your house if your business goes down, right? If you know what you're doing. They're created so that, you know, you can rise and fall, get back up again, do it again and do it again, right? Unless, you know, you're a strategic, you know, fraudster. And then
Like Donald Trump.
telling reasons why the law would say, can we pierce the corporate veil? But a corporation is kind of like a shield, right? For individuals who want to do business, but you don't want to risk the liability. You don't want to risk yourself, what all the things that you've built and worked for all these years, just in case something goes down. And keeping that in mind as well, when we're working with other people, like we can control ourselves, but we can't control what other people do, right? And people change, people evolve, right? Just like a marriage, just like a relationship, business partnerships break down all the time, right? So you want to do the best that you can do to protect yourself. There are times where people will walk away from the business and it's not really in line with what the partnership agreement says. But then the people that are left there, they have to pick up the bag. They got to do what they have to do. They have got to make decisions of whether or not, you know, I should keep this business running. So before you step or make that step, you have to think about, how can I best protect myself if this doesn't work out? Because maybe it won't, right? Maybe it will, maybe it won't. But you want to be able to protect yourself personally if there's a breakdown in business.
Could I give another
question.
example, Jackie? That's another example. So like last night when I talk about, I have 2 organizations where I have the Beyond Services where I support adult and children with disability. So what I've done 6 months after incorporating that's a partnership. What I've done is incorporated Getty's concept, right? So when I work for Beyond Services and when I go out and I support individual with disability, that's Getty's concept working. That's not Nikisha. So that's a partnership that is in partnership with Getty's concept, not Nikisha. And that's where the 2 business come in. So I have the 2 corporation. So Getty's concept does its own thing. And when I'm there working, so if whatever happened with that partnership and Beyond Services, I'm still protected under Getty's concept, right? So my liability and everything Nikisha Getty is protected.
Yeah, I get it.
Only because there's a partnership. And as Latania said, when it comes on to partnership, you never know what the future looks like. So you got to protect yourself at all times. And God forbid there's a lawsuit. What does that look like for you? I always tell my client, think of the worst case scenario when going to business, because that's how you protect yourself. Like, you know, you got to think 10 years ahead, 5 years ahead, not just in the now. The now is just now. You got to look like that forecast and protect yourself.
Yeah, got it. Thank you, guys.
So somebody asked a question about taxes, and I'll get to that later, but I'll say that your taxes are different for individuals and in the partnership. But with business taxes, you have to pay the CRA, because what this CRA will pierce that like partnership thing, and they will come after you personally if they find that you as a partner are able to pay the taxes. So if you've not incorporated yourself and you just joined as like Latania and Nikisha, make sure that you pay the taxes of the corporation, pay the CRA, because there's no way of getting around it. You will have to pay no matter what, whether it's through personally or the business, you'll have to pay. There's also some agency issues when it comes to the disadvantages of partnerships. So each partner has the ability to bind the corporation. So I can go to the bank if I'm a partner and I could get a loan. I could sign for the document because I'm a partner. Therefore, each partner becomes liable for the commitments that another partner takes on. So I can go take out a car for my business if I'm a partner. And these are things that you have to think about before joining a partnership, because as again, like relationships break down. The lifespan of partnerships, you need to specifically state how long this is going to last for. If you know it's going to go beyond retirement or the death of a partner. And they have to think about transferability. Partnerships need to specifically state in their contract if this could be transferred to a different partner, or the partnership interest can transfer to a different person. So within the partnerships, there's limited liability partnerships or limited partnerships. And in these organizations, there's a general partner that manages the partnership and conducts the business, and there are limited partners that don't really become involved in the business. And sometimes these are people who just like invest. Or they're just some people that support, right? But if you start a limited liability partnership, then your liability is limited. It's not exposed like a general partnership. The advantage is that the limited partner allows the limited partner to contribute their capital without becoming exposed to unlimited liability. So in a limited liability partnership, you are only responsible for what you have put into the partnership, what you've invested. But this protection, it evaporates if the limited partner becomes actively involved in the management of the company. So even if you form a limited liability partnership and you say, Nikisha says, I'm a limited partner, and she gives me $10,000 for a $100,000 business. If Nikisha's showing up every day, if she's doing the work and if she's doing things behind the scenes and she just says that she's a limited partner, brought before the court, if we owe, Canada Revenue, if we owe, somebody another 50,000, and I say, well, I'm a general partner. This is whatever. I'm trying to say that Nikisha owns or is responsible as well. I could bring a case before the court and say, look, Nikisha's here every day. She manages payroll, she does this and she does this. She just says that she's a limited liability partner because she doesn't want to have on paper that she's responsible, but she's actually doing the work. So that the debt of the corporation has to become her debt as well. And it's most likely that the court is going to rule in my favor because she was doing whatever she was not supposed to be doing. So if you decide to enter into a limited liability partnership, where you're only responsible for the amount of money that you've invested, make sure that you don't overstep, make sure that you don't do what you're not supposed to do, and make sure that you don't go over and manage the operation of the business, because you will be held responsible, just like the general partnership for jointly and severally of the corporation. And advantages. So sorry, a disadvantage is a limited liability partner. It cannot play any part in the direction of the business. And we talked about that. So the structure of the limited liability partnership is that it's only available to professional firms. So this is like law firms. This is why you'll see an LLP behind a law firm. This is why you'll see an LLP behind like an accounting firm or an engineering firm. Advantages are partners are excluded from the liability of negligence or other wrongful acts of another partner. This is limited liability partnership, not limited partnerships, right? So if my boss does something dumb and it's his responsibility, it's his fault, and people decide to sue him, or the other partners are not responsible, that's him. And lawyers and other professionals, teachers and whatever else, they have insurances that cover this kind of stuff. We pay into it every month or every year, and you report it to your insurance company and they deal with it, right? Unless it's something like so gross that it goes before the court. When I say gross, I don't mean disgusting. I mean large in scale and magnitude. And then, we have to end up paying and litigating that. So the advantage of a limited liability partnership is that partners are excluded from the liability of negligent or the wrongful acts of other partners. And the final thing, the greatest thing, the best business structure that is available that I'm going to advocate for is a business corporation. And why? Because you're protected from liability. And I don't want to see any of you in my office, either virtually or physically. So I'm going to tell you, this is the highest operating cost. You have to pay an accountant. You have to pay taxes. But the offside of that is all the responsibility is a responsibility of the corporation, right? So in a business corporation, they're creatures of statute. We have the Canadian Corporations Act. And in order to incorporate, you have to choose the jurisdiction, whether that's Ontario or whether that is a Canadian jurisdiction. And other corporations can work in Canada as well. In the United States, a lot of people like to incorporate in Delaware because that's like, it's so cheap to incorporate there. Because every place you have to pay a fee to incorporate. Shareholders can customize the relationship of the corporation and the structure of the corporation in the constitutions, and these are called the articles of incorporation, the bylaws, or the shareholder agreements. Management and ownership of the corporation are often separated. So management are people who do things like every day, the day-to-day operations, and the shareholders are the people who own the shares of the corporation. If you're starting off a small corporation, it could be very well that the managers and the owners are the same. But when you become a more complex organization, like Bombardier or Air Canada, then your managers are going to be different from your shareholders. And there's going to be a lot more shareholders. There's going to be a lot more classes of shares. And there are going to be some differences, and there has to be some separation and different types of duties that you have. So an advantage of a corporation is that you're a separate legal entity. A corporation is a person under law. And you'll have some religious people that will say, well, you can't be a person because you don't have a soul and you don't have this. For legal purposes, for business, a corporation is a separate person. There are a lot of things that a corporation can do that is protected by rights and charter rights, not all charter rights. But there are other things that it can't. There's no like freedom of religion in a corporation or anything like that. So people can play multiple roles as employees, officers, directors, and shareholders. And as I said before, the corporation has charter rights and the ability to enter into, to sue, and to be sued on contracts. It is a distinct taxable entity in Canada with some lower tax rates. And a corporation, remember when I said that a partnership, you'd have to think about how long you want this corporation to continue. A corporation has a perpetual lifespan. It could exist forever and ever and ever. An example of a really long-standing corporation in Canada would be the Hudson's Bay Company. The Hudson's Bay Company, I think, was formed in like the 1700s or the 1800s. And they used to like trade fur and different things like that. And you've seen what the Bay is today, right? And it was formed by letters patent by the Queen. Not the Queen didn't do it herself, but this is just how corporations were formed then, that you had to stamp, and like it had to be like somebody that was an agent of the crown. And it's still in existence today with many different shares and different operations all throughout Canada, doing many different things than it did before, right? So that's an example of like the perpetual lifespan of a corporation, of what it can look like into continuity. There's limited liability in the corporation, or shareholders' liability is limited to their investment in the corporation. And this shifts the risk from shareholders to other stakeholders, including like creditors, suppliers, employees in the business organization. In a corporation, it's more flexible in the ownership, in the management and structure, and it's easy to transfer shares and to transfer the ownership of the corporation. However, there are also disadvantages. In order to incorporate, you have to file documents. You have to adopt a constitution, and you have to register with the government agency. Unlike a sole proprietorship, when I remember I said that there was no laws that tell you how to form this. There's like nothing there that really restricts what you can do. There's a lot of autonomy. In terms of forming a corporation, there is a structure that you have to follow. Annual returns containing the prescribed information must be filed in your province every year as an annual return. And just when I see a question, but I'm just almost done, so I'm just going to finish and then answer. Corporations in Canada who wish to do business in multiple jurisdictions must be incorporated federally or obtain extra provincial licenses to operate in different provinces. You have to register the name of the corporation under the Business Names Act if the business name is different from the corporate name. And corporations are required to hold meetings, elect directors, or provide shareholders with information. And you have to create a system of double taxation on income. So like corporate tax, dividends are taxed for like personal incomes and payouts. And I just wanted to say about like holding meetings and informing people of these meetings. Sometimes corporations will start like even with the family, a husband and wife, right? Or where you could be like 50% shareholders, and it could be a small business. And sometimes when like a marriage or like a romantic relationship breaks down, that party decides not to share corporate information with the other party. Don't do this. You're going to be in court for a long time, and you're gonna have to reveal the monies in the corporation. We have a case right now, and I think that this has been litigated over 14 years. And one spouse just decided that I'm going to stop reporting the income of the corporation because we're actually divorced. And the court said, no, you can't do that. You have to report, and we represent the party that's looking for these materials. You have to report, you have to give information. And one of the real interesting things about like litigation in terms of the business aspect are the remedies that are available for corporations. There's a lot more remedies. And when we say remedies or relief that's available if you're a shareholder, then there are that are available if you're a sole proprietor. You can't have a relief against yourself, and a partnership. So one of the reliefs that we do in court, it's called an oppression remedy. And basically anybody in the corporation can bring a lawsuit if their rights are infringed. So if you are in a corporation, say 50% with another person, and they're not showing you the income of the corporation, the profits, the revenue, you would come to a lawyer like me and say, Latania, I need to bring a suit before the court. And what we'll do is bring a claim for oppression and say, you know, this person is a shareholder and they're not accessing their rights because there's something that's happening, whatever. And the courts will put an injunction on the corporation. They'll stop what you're doing. They'll freeze your accounts. We'll ask for all these things to be done until we get what we want. And sometimes it takes a long time and a lot of money to do what doesn't need to take a long time and a lot of money. So when you're going to, or you're thinking about forming a partnership or sorry, a corporation, you can't run it like you would run a mom and pop business. You can't run it like you would run a juice bar by yourself. And you can't run it like you'd run a partnership. You have to run it like the act says you have to run it. You can't withhold information. You can't choose to tell the person, other shareholders, what you want. You can't not hold meetings. If the statute requires you to have annual meetings, you have to have annual meetings. If you're supposed to have bylaws, have the bylaws, because that makes it so much easier when there's a relationship breakdown to navigate through. So overall, the advantages for the corporation really, I think they outweigh the disadvantages. But there are certain like circumstances where people are just not able to incorporate. Some of those places or some of those instances are professional firms. And now the laws have changed where some firms are operating under professional corporations. Where there's short-term business relationships, it's not advised that you start a corporation. Or if you want to take advantage of tax breaks, the best way to do that is through a corporation. There are limited liability corporations, like I said before, the law firms that allow shareholders like limited liability for limited purposes, whether for tax or for income or losses. And there's also specialized type of corporations that you could do under special circumstances like Air Canada, that, you know, there's laws that govern who can do things within this field. And sometimes if you're running a business like a franchising business, I think Nikisha had mentioned this before, like some of those like insurance companies, they might not give you the permission to start your own corporation, right? So you have to think about whatever contracting or contractual relationship you have already. Think about the laws, think about the profession that you're in or the area that you're going in. And based on those factors, you might not be able to incorporate. But if you can't incorporate, there are still things that you can do to protect yourself from liability. And that brings me to the end.
Thank you, Latania. That was great. Did you answer the tax? Did you go through the taxes? Someone had a question about
so the greatest tax relief or the greatest tax advantages come from the corporation.
Okay, so the question was, what about taxes for, I guess, later? Are they the same for corporation as part? Is the tax the same for corporation and partnership? I think that's what you're asking.
They're different. The taxes, because the corporation is a legal entity in itself, a separate body, then it's different. The taxes of the corporation are the taxes of the corporation. For the partnership, you have to pay some taxes, so you're not completely insulated.
Okay, so the next question is, do you need to have a partnership agreement for a business corporation?
So for a business corporation, you need to have a bylaws and you have to have a business agreement. So like a shareholder agreement.
Okay. And the next question is, do you have to have a governing board for a corporation?
Okay, so yes, but that could just be one person and it could just be you.
Okay. Any other question? Any more question? That was a lot. Oh my goodness. I even learned some stuff tonight. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. This was amazing. What I want you guys to do is just to digest all this information. I'm going to get the replay up and running. Hopefully I can get it to you by tomorrow. I'm going to try work on it tonight. But if not, you'll have it before the end of the week. And I just want to encourage you guys to be here for the full 5 days. So tomorrow I'm going to go to the business blueprint. This is my favorite part. This is where I'll teach you what you need to have within your business plan. Like honestly, I recommend everyone need to have a business plan before they start a business. You need, just like the building that you're in, the house that you're in, there had to be a blueprint before anyone could build a structure, right? So what is the blueprint for your business? You need that blueprint so you could build a structure the way that you imagine it to be. And that's where the blueprint comes in. On Thursday, I'm going to be talking about branding. Right? Branding is so important for your business, for yourself, how you put yourself out there. So I'm going to touch a little bit about branding and how to position yourself in the industry. Visibility is the key to any business. If you're not visible, honestly, it's going to be hard for you to strive. It's going to be hard for you to get the, I don't know, grow your business the way that you want to grow, and knowing what kind of visibility you need within your industry. Every industry needs the same. Not all industry need to be on social media, right? Some industry, there's other ways to promote yourself because social media is not for you. So that's where I'll go through a bit about that with branding. And Friday is launch day. Friday, we're going to celebrate Friday. I'm going to, have some special offer for you. So I want you to be here, celebrate celebrate, you just being here for the last 5 days. I appreciate you. I love you all. Thank you all for showing